John Talty, CBS Sports, who joins us on 365 Sports. And John, if you were the AD at Penn State, would you make this decision, that kind of buyout, with a guy with a hell of a record, without knowing who your next coach would be?
I think it's possible that you have to, because I think some of this stuff is just fluid. And, what I mean by that is there are guys who at this point in the season might look like great candidates and fade down the stretch. And there are other candidates who you might not be thinking much about. And by the end of the season, they're leading a hot program that might be a playoff contender. But I think you have to have at least a good idea of which direction you're going. And I think they have a strong sense of what they want. The question is just whether they can get what they want. And I think if you especially are looking for an upgrade over a guy who went to the national semifinals a year ago, there's just a very small pool of candidates that I think could possibly fit that criteria. We understand that Penn State's very willing to spend money on this hire. We know they're obviously willing to spend a lot of money to make James Franklin go away. So I think they'll be aggressive in going after candidates. I think you probably feel like you have to kick the tires on at least a few people just to see if they're potentially movable. But I think it also is helpful sometimes to know, all right, if I maybe miss on ABC, where is my line of demarcation where I'm not going past it? And I would think that Penn State has a pretty good sense of where that line is going to be.
What do you think that Penn State pulling this plug does for other guys around the country at programs like a Billy Napier or a Mike Norvell who have not accomplished near what James Franklin has, seeing as their fan bases will now say, like, hey, hold on. If they're going to fire James Franklin, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, they're saying like all politics are local politics, right? So I think every school, it's still an individual decision, and every school's financial situation can be different. I think that Florida State paying Mike Norvell $50+ million to leave is a lot harder for Florida State than it is for Penn State, just from some of where they stand from a financial standpoint, what they're trying to do at those different individual campuses. But I do think that Penn State getting out in front of this thing makes it easier in some ways for some of these other programs to pull the plug if they need to, just in the sense that no one, to my knowledge, and I don't want to jinx this, but I would be surprised if anyone else spends 50, if not 50 or more million on a buyout. So anyone coming after this is most likely going to be below that, maybe half it, if not more. So I think it gives you some cover in that sense, just from a national standpoint. But I do think that, there's a lot of big time programs that might still have to make moves. Florida is one of them. Auburn, Wisconsin. There's a couple of programs that we're keeping an eye on to see what they might do. And maybe it does make it a little bit more palatable for some of them, but I still think it's kind of individual in terms of their booster base, their cash on hand, and all those other kind of things that you might put into the equation.
John, is Curt Cignetti the belle of the ball now? I mean, I know you guys have had some reporting and some writing already about Cignetti and kind of what it would take and, all of that. But, I mean, gosh, is he just like the face of the carousel at this point, or just the face of the coaches that everybody's, like, I guess, wanting to try and land and, catch a hot streak like Indiana has?
Yeah, I mean, he's, I think, probably the best hire in maybe a decade that any program has made. When you understand the context of where Indiana has been and where they are right now, it's truly unbelievable. But I think it also shows what's capable of happening when you have the proper, and this is a word that everyone overuses, but I think Indiana is a great example of when it's actually playing out. When you have the proper alignment from the president, who's very heavily invested in wanting football to be good, to the AD who wants it to be successful. And of course, you've got to catch this incredible coach who brought the right players, the right staff with him from James Madison, and had unbelievable success at Indiana. So he's the name that I think every search is going to have near the top of their list. I think it's also, and I wrote about this today at CBSSports.com, like, I think it's also people just expect, we can coach Steele from Indiana. That's a basketball school. Like, we're better than them. And I understand that notion, but I think what people maybe don't understand is that this is not the old Indiana. Curt Cignetti is already making $8.3 million a year. He'll get a $1 million retention bonus at the end of November. He has an $11 million staff pool, which is at the very top in the country. He was able to hold on to his defensive coordinator, who now makes $2 million a year, Bryant Haynes. So they're investing major money. One of my colleagues, Richard Johnson, talked to Mark Cuban last week. Mark Cuban's given money now. He's an Indiana alum. Indiana has some real money, and they want football to be successful. So it's going to be very hard, in my opinion, and from talking to different people, to pull him out of Bloomington. He's in a good spot. It's not to say he'll never leave, but I think he has shown what is possible at a school like Indiana when you have all the proper investment, and that you do not have to go to a quote-unquote blue blood to be successful. I mean, they went to the playoffs a year ago. They're on pace to do it again. They might go undefeated this season if you look at the rest of their schedule, possibly getting a first-round bye or a home playoff game. That's back-to-back potentially playoff appearances for the Indiana Hoosiers. Why leave that scenario to maybe go to a place like Florida, which would die for those results, that has a much, no matter what Curt says, a much harder schedule week in, week out in the SEC, more pressure. Like, sometimes you think about, like, I'm in a great spot right now. Why do I have to leave this that's been so great to me to go to a place that's more pressurized and maybe has similar level of resources as what I'm getting already at Indiana?
You know, it's there are surprises occasionally, and the playoff maybe opens up that, as TCU, even though they were blown out in the championship game, proved in 22. But you hear about that the bigger are getting bigger, richer, whatever. But Indiana and Texas Tech, and no matter how they've done it, to me, that's refreshing as hell, John, with what we see as the super conferences in the future and much more.
Parity's great. I think look at why, in part, the NFL is so great is that on any given week, it seems like any team can win. And, I'm unfortunately a long-suffering New York Jets fan, so it does not apply to my team, but every other team typically feels like they have a shot. And you see a lot of changes year over year. I mean, yes, the Chiefs are in it every year, but it feels like year to year, there's a lot of teams that go in and out of the playoffs, and that's fun. It's great to see teams that have a shot to win beyond just the same team over and over again. I mean, I covered a lot of the Alabama dynasty on a personal level. A lot of fun to cover national championships every year, but I don't know that that's necessarily great for the sport. And I think especially, where things stand in college sports right now, getting more, not only fan bases, but also like markets involved. I can remember talking to Greg Sankey, and he's made this point publicly, like part of his concern and reason why he wanted to expand the playoff was like he was worried that we're going to lose the West Coast. We're going to lose some of these areas of the country because they're not putting teams in this 4-team playoff, and they're going to stop tuning in. And I think there was some truth to that. And I think having a Texas Tech involved, having Oregon, having Indiana, and on, there's other programs that are trying to level up as well. Illinois has had some moments in the last 2 years. Like, I think that's healthy for the game. You've seen things kind of flatten out a bit where there's maybe not that super dominant team the way we've seen with Bama and Georgia and some of these others in the last decade or so, but there's more teams who feel like they have a shot. And I think that's great for the sport. I also think it does make it easier for some of these coaches to decide, hey, I've got a great path to making the playoff of where I'm at. I don't necessarily have to jump to this other school that maybe 20 years ago felt like gave me a better shot to be a national champion.
Yeah, there's not that this school is bad for me anymore. Like it now I can't do anything more here. Now that probably still exists in the group of 6, but as long as you have a president and an AD that supports you and can get that, help you get the money you need, I don't see any reason to just try to be. I know this is a basketball reference, but like a Larry Brown Hopper, to like, I'll go here and here and here. Like, just stay where you are until they get tired of you.
Well, and even to your point, like, I'll give you a good example at the G6 level. Like, John Summerall at Tulane, from what I've been told, is making about $4 million a year at Tulane, G6 level. That's great money. I mean, that's not that far off than some of the lower P4s, what they're paying. And so what that affords you to do is to be patient. You can say, you know what, I've got a shot at making the playoff through that, that G6 playoff spot. I'm making really good money. I get to live in New Orleans. It's a great city. Being able to recruit pretty well based on kind of my recruiting base. Like, I don't need to just jump at the first Power 4 job that comes my way. I can wait and try to stay for maybe one of the better P4 jobs. And so I think it's just across the board, you're seeing some more patience from some of these guys. Ryan Silverfield at Memphis has been there for a while now. He's a candidate seemingly every year. He will be again. Maybe this is the year that he leaves. But when you're able to be a top 25 team at a Memphis, at a South Florida, at a Tulane, gives you some patience to say, all right, I've got it rolling pretty good right now. I don't need to go for the first thing. So I do think the era of having to jump just to make more money is kind of over at this point. When, again, you can make close to $9 million at Indiana. That's unbelievable. I mean, that's SEC caliber money. And so certainly there's going to be caps at different schools where if you want to truly make that elite money, you have to jump. Certainly there are still natural advantages that programs like Penn State, programs like Florida are going to have over some of these other programs. But you also, I think, have to weigh that quality of life. And, to kind of circle back of some of how we started here, like some of that, if he gets offered the job, and I know he's going to be a top candidate at Penn State, Matt Rhule probably has to think about, like, I've got a great life in Nebraska. I've gotten this thing kind of back and rolling, not maybe to the peak of what Tom Osborne was doing, but I have restored some credibility and stability here. My kids can go to the games, as he said the other day. My wife loves living here. Like, do I want to leave that for a job that after this guy just took them to a national semifinal, he gets fired 6 games into the following season? Like, those things I think all can start factoring in when you're already making a lot of money and you're pretty happy with where you are.
John, thank you very much, buddy. Good time. And the Rhule thing is interesting because Franklin couldn't win big games. Rhule's 2-23. Now, Temple, Baylor, and at Nebraska, all of them were rebuilds, but his record against the top 25 is not as good as James Franklin's. And so, yes, he's it's an alum. He played there, all of that, but that will be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. And I think certainly Penn State has more resources than those places do.
Sure.
I mean, this is a job that I know he's had his eye on. He has an incredibly close relationship with Penn State AD Pat Kraft. They still vacation together. They started doing that back in the Temple days when Pat Kraft wasn't even the AD yet. From my understanding, they were vacationing on the Jersey Shore, which is a place that I love as well as a New Jersey native. But so they have this extremely close relationship. And it's why, again, people have told me that Matt's the guy to keep an eye on. I got that even before James Franklin was fired. I had people telling me, hey, things are afoot here. Keep an eye on Matt Rhule. So I think there is reason why so many believe that Matt Rhule has a decent, strong, whatever word you want to use, possibility to be the next Penn State head coach. But again, I'll just give an example here. I've watched a decent amount of Nebraska's games so far this season, and including watching their game against Maryland the other day, where they probably should have lost that game, could have lost to Cincinnati. That changes the tenor of the conversation, especially with the stat that you just used. So I think the schedule sets up very nicely for Nebraska to keep winning. I think they can easily be a 9 or 10 win team at the end of the season, which would be an incredible year for Nebraska, given where they've been over the last decade plus. But if it goes the other way and they don't win another game and they're 5-7 or whatever it is at this point, like, I don't know how you can sell that higher to the fan base. So you can look at where things are right now on October 14th and think, all right, this is one of the top guys, a couple other names as well that I think are going to be in that mix. But how things play out over the rest of the year can have an impact on whether you can sell that to a fan base that clearly made it known that what James Franklin was doing, which was at a very high level to a lot of programs, was not good enough. And you have to be able to sell to them, the guy that I got you is better than the one I just fired and spent $50 million to leave.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. John Talty with us all the time. Has some great information, stories, and including the coaching carousel.